So, do you even contribute anything real? Or is your Etsy shop just arts and crafts therapy? My husband asked me this in front of 12 people, his parents, his sisters, their spouses, even my teenage son. They all laughed. I smiled too. That tight, mechanical kind of smile you give when your body's still frozen from the slap. Except this one wasn't with a hand, it was with words sharpened by years of quiet contempt. I was just pouring wine when he said it, just trying to play the polite host at our annual Thanksgiving dinner, while he played the part of the charming, successful provider. He didn't mention that we were behind on the mortgage. He didn't mention that his big investment had gone under. He didn't mention that I had paid for the turkey with money from my side hustle. They never ask what I do, because in their eyes, it doesn't count. Selling handmade products online? That's not a real job. Staying up past midnight to fulfill orders, balancing inventory, learning SEO, customer retention? That's just me, playing entrepreneur. So, I played along. I let them think I was the sweet, supportive, delusional wife. Let them believe my spreadsheets were just grocery lists. Let them laugh because I had stopped needing their validation long ago. While they clinked their wine glasses, I was already planning something far more elegant than revenge. Something slow, precise, and incredibly profitable. Because what they didn't know was that my little Etsy hobby had just cleared its first $100,000 quarter, and that I had no intention of rescuing my husband when the debt collectors came knocking. But what happened next? No one saw coming. There was a time I believed we were building something together. Chris and I met when we were both broke 20-somethings. He was juggling grad school and bar shifts. I was working full-time at a daycare and crocheting at night just to cover rent. We'd eat instant ramen on the floor of our first apartment and talk about our dreams. His, to run his own tech firm. Mine, to one day sell my designs beyond Etsy. We were partners, or at least that's what I thought. But somewhere along the way, maybe after his second promotion, or our first mortgage approval, he stopped seeing me as his equal and started seeing me as background noise. I didn't notice it at first. He'd say things like, "You're so lucky you don't have to deal with deadlines," or "Must be nice to do what you love without the pressure." Harmless, right? Until those words started cutting deeper, becoming more public, more intentional. At family dinners, he'd make little jokes, like when his sister asked about my crocheting and he said, "Oh, she's turning our garage into a grandma sweatshop." Or when his dad once asked how I managed our finances, and Chris laughed, "She plays with yarn, I handle the money." I smiled, always smiled, but inside, I was bleeding. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he never introduced me as a business owner. The way he'd cut me off when I tried to explain what I did. The way he told our son to aim higher than your mom when he asked about career day. He wasn't violent. He never yelled. But he chipped away at me with subtle, constant disrespect. Death by 1,000 smiles. What stung the most wasn't that he didn't believe in my work. It was that he used to. Chris was the one who gifted me my first label printer. He used to stay up with me packing holiday orders. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "You're gonna make it big one day." But that version of him faded. Maybe he got scared when I started making real money. Maybe it bruised his ego to see my side gig pulling in more than his job ever had. So instead of lifting me up, he pushed me down, mocked me, dismissed me, until even our son started asking, "Why don't you get a real job like Dad?" That question broke me, not because it came from a place of malice. He was only repeating what he heard, but because it made me realize I was disappearing, right in front of the people I loved. And so, one night after Chris laughed at a custom order I was working on, calling it pillow art for lonely women, I did something I hadn't done in years. I closed my laptop, went to our bedroom, locked the door, and cried. Not because I was weak, but because I knew that something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to beg to be seen anymore. I wasn't going to argue with someone who enjoyed the sound of his own mockery. That night, I wrote a note to myself on the back of a shipping label: "Build silently, win loudly." And from that moment on, that's exactly what I did. After that night, I became quiet, but not the kind of quiet that fades into the background. The kind of quiet that sharpens, that studies, that waits. I stopped trying to explain my work to Chris, stopped inviting him to see my spreadsheets, my milestones, my late night wins. He didn't notice, or maybe he did, but preferred the silence, less space for him to feel small. Meanwhile, I worked harder than I ever had. By day, I was the mom, the homemaker, the smiling woman who packed lunches, folded laundry, and picked up groceries. But by night, after dishes were washed and lights were dimmed, I transformed. I taught myself marketing funnels and email automation, learned how to build a Shopify store from scratch, joined online communities of women just like me, quiet builders, underestimated wives, exhausted mothers turning pain into profit. And while Chris slept, I made connections, not just with customers, but with mentors. I met a woman named Darla, a former executive who'd left the corporate world to coach female founders. She saw me, not as a crafter, but as a brand. Under her guidance, I restructured everything: pricing, product lines, fulfillment. I hired 2 remote assistants, moved operations out of the garage and into a rented studio down the street, opened a business checking account in my name only, registered an LLC. But at home, nothing changed, at least not on the surface. I still made Chris's coffee, still listened to him rant about work politics, still smiled when he tossed off backhanded compliments like, "You're lucky your hobby lets you stay in pajamas all day." He didn't notice that I stopped asking about his job, didn't ask why I had a new iPad, or why I started leaving earlier in the morning saying I had errands. He was too busy trying to fix his latest bad investment, a friend's crypto startup that had eaten through most of our savings. I watched quietly as the bills piled up: mortgage, credit cards, car note. Chris kept telling me not to worry. I've got it under control. But I already knew the truth. I'd seen the red notices tucked under magazines. I'd heard the late-night calls with creditors, and I'd checked the joint account. It was nearly empty. One evening, he came home agitated, blaming his boss, the economy, unfair regulations. I nodded, made him dinner, let him vent, then stayed up past midnight, fulfilling 237 orders each one, bringing me closer to financial freedom. I had a whiteboard in my studio where I wrote one word every week: distance. Emocional, financial, mental. Every order shipped was another inch of distance from him. Our marriage became a performance. He played the breadwinner on the brink, and I played the fool who didn't know better. But behind the scenes, I had more liquidity than he did. My business had just crossed $300,000 in annual revenue. My savings account under my name only was growing fast, and I had quietly consulted with a lawyer about financial separation. Not divorce, not yet. Just preparedness. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, sharp, unforgiving in my clarity. He didn't deserve a war. He deserved to be forgotten, while I built something he never believed I could. The storm was no longer brewing. It was already here. He just hadn't noticed the thunder yet. The first real shift came on a Wednesday. Chris had forgotten his laptop charger at home and called me in a panic. He needed it now, or his team presentation would flop. I was midway through packing a wholesale order for a boutique in Austin, our biggest account yet. But I drove across town anyway. When I stepped into his office, the receptionist looked me up and down like I didn't belong. I was wearing my studio hoodie, hair in a bun, fingers stained from dye. She asked, "Are you with catering?" I smiled and said, "Number, I own a textile company." "Not de crujit." "Not I make things. I own a company." She blinked, confused. I didn't explain. When I handed Chris his charger, he muttered a rushed thanks and walked off before I could speak another word. I left the building invisible. Again, but this time it didn't hurt, because I knew something he didn't. That same afternoon, I got an email from a major subscription box service. They wanted to feature my products in their winter edition, over 50,000 units. It would push my revenue past $500,000. So I said yes. Then I called Darla. We expanded operations, hired more help, leased a larger studio, and I didn't say a word to Chris. By summer, our roles had quietly reversed. Chris was dodging debt collectors. I was attending virtual meetings with investors. He started asking, "Do you think we could maybe dip into your Etsy earnings for the mortgage this month?" I told him the truth. I moved the money to a business account. I can't touch it. It's not technically ours. He didn't argue, not out loud, but his eyes changed like he was finally realizing the cage he built for me had no locks. I stayed because I chose to, not because I had nowhere to go. Then came the moment I had been preparing for. A family reunion. His entire clan, dozens of them. And Chris, ever the peacock, asked me to bring some of my little crafts to show off. Just set up a table or something, he said. The kids might like it. I almost declined. Almost. But instead, I showed up with branded packaging, a product display, business cards, QR codes, and a retractable banner that read, Elysian Threads, handcrafted, scaled globally, underneath. As featured in Vogue, Winter Co., and Lux Living. His cousin's wife asked, "Wait, this is yours?" I nodded. His uncle asked, "You're in Vogue?" I nodded again. And then, sweetest of all, his own mother turned to him and said, "Why didn't you ever tell us her business was this big?" Chris froze. I didn't gloat, didn't explain, just handed her a product card and smiled. By the end of the night, I'd made nearly $8,000 in sales, and something even more valuable. Public validation without ever asking for it. The power dynamic had flipped completely. And Chris, he looked small in a way I'd never seen before. Not because I had humiliated him, but because I had risen too far beyond his reach. It happened faster than I expected, but not faster than I had prepared for. Chris's final gamble was an urgent opportunity he couldn't resist. A friend had tipped him off about a high-yield real estate flip in Arizona. He drained the last of our joint credit line to get in. He even joked, "We'll finally be able to fund your little empire properly once this pays off." I just nodded. 3 months later, the deal collapsed. The developer disappeared. The money? Gone. Creditors called every day. Chris snapped more often, now short with our son, irritated by every noise I made. He paced the kitchen at midnight, mumbling numbers that didn't add up. And still, I stayed quiet. Then came the breaking point. Chris was terminated from his job. Official reason? Budget cuts. Unofficially? A whisper network I knew about weeks before the firm had been preparing to clean house. And Chris's constant stress-fueled mistakes had made him a liability. I found the letter on the counter the morning he was fired. Typed, cold, final. He hadn't even told me yet. That night, he sat across from me at dinner, silent. His hands trembled. He didn't eat, just stared at the mashed potatoes I had spooned onto his plate like a ritual. "I need your help," he said finally. His voice was dry, like he'd swallowed 1,000 apologies, but couldn't bring himself to say one. I looked up from my glass. "Help." He nodded. "I need a loan, just to float us a couple months, until I figure something out." I studied him. This man who once joked I was a hobbyist, who laughed when I showed him my first profit report, who told our son I was lucky to not have a real job. Now he was drowning, and I had a yacht. I placed my fork down gently. "Chris," I said softly, "I'm sorry, but the business isn't just mine anymore. It's a registered LLC. I have partners now. Legal structure. We can't pull personal money out for private use, not without consequences." He blinked. "Besides," I added, "if I remember correctly, I don't really have a real job, remember?" He said nothing. A few days later, the news spread. His cousin worked in finance. His sister heard from someone at the firm. At a family BBQ, someone asked where Chris was working now. His own uncle answered, "He's not. Heard he tanked a 6-figure deal and got canned." The backyard went quiet. I stood by the cooler, sipping lemonade. Didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just watched the humiliation spread across the same faces that once laughed at me. Later that evening, Chris's sister approached me. "I had no idea your business was that big," she said. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I shrugged. There was never a point. You all already decided what I was. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the same silence they used to drown me in. It's been 12 months since Chris moved out. He left on a rainy Tuesday morning 2 duffel bags, a stack of unopened mail, and a silence between us so thick it felt like a third person in the room. No fight, no scene, just a quiet closing of a door that had creaked too long on its hinges. He moved into a small apartment across town, took a consulting gig that barely covered rent. We still speak about our son, logistics, bills that remain under both names, but the warmth is gone. What's left is a cordial, empty echo of what once was. And me? I wake up in a different house now, a 2-story craftsman I bought under my own name. In a neighborhood where no one knows my past, only my business. My studio is no longer in a garage. It's in a glass front space downtown, with a team of 6 and a waiting list for custom orders that stretches into next spring. I still work late nights, still wrap packages with care, still answer customer emails myself. But there's a piece to it now, a quiet, earned pride in every sale, every stitch. Sometimes I catch glimpses of my old self in the mirror, the woman who smiled through mockery, who held in her tears during dinner parties. She still lives inside me, but now she stands taller. My son is different too. He no longer asks if what I do is real. He watches me lead meetings, manage staff, speak at local women's conferences. He brags to his friends that his mom runs an empire. Last week, I found the note I wrote that night, the one I scribbled on the back of a shipping label. Build silently, win loudly. I framed it. It hangs above my desk now, between 2 photos. One of my first product mock-up, and one from the Vogue feature that changed everything. I don't hate Chris. Not anymore. Hate requires energy, and I've got better things to spend mine on. Just let him go. The way you let go of an anchor that once kept you from drifting before you realized it was only pulling you under. And that, I think, is what freedom really is. Not the absence of pain, but the power to choose what no longer gets to define you. Sometimes, the loudest revenge is silence. You don't always need to fight to win. Sometimes, you just need to stop explaining yourself and start building in the dark. This story reminds us that validation from others is fleeting, but belief in yourself? That's unshakable. You can be underestimated, dismissed, even ridiculed, but none of that defines your worth. What matters is what you do when no one's watching. The quiet work, the nights you show up for yourself, the fire you keep alive when the world tries to put it out. And when the time comes, when the world finally sees what you've built, you won't need to say a word. Your success will speak for itself. So to anyone who's ever been told they're not enough, keep going, keep building, and one day, the same voices that doubted you will be silenced by the sound of your rise. What would you have done in her shoes? After years of being mocked, dismissed, and belittled by the very person who was supposed to love her, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She built, and now she stands taller than anyone expected. But now that she's finally free, what's next for her? Should she rebuild her life in peace? Or keep making noise with her success? Should she forgive Chris? Or stay distant for good? We want to hear your thoughts. If you were her friend, what would you tell her to do next? What part of her story hit you the hardest? Drop your opinions in the comments below. And if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or quietly rising from the ashes, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and remember, your story matters. Let's talk about it right here in the comments.